Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about things that confuse programmers. So let's get into it. Well, this is a very open question. What confuses programmers? Many things, I suppose, but I'm gonna narrow it down to one of the many things that can confuse a programmer, and more specifically, confuse me. So, if I'm gonna pick something, I suppose that the thing that confuses me among the mostly within software development, and I also know that it confuses a lot of people who are fairly new in this industry, is this idea of quality and the decision-making process of pretty much every single manager and team and any company I've ever been part of. I've never worked for a company where this hasn't been true. And the thing that I'm talking about is basically that you have this idea of, or rather, that's the way that most IT companies are promoting themselves. So there is this facade quite often where we talk as if we only hire the best programmers, we use the latest technology, we try our best to, or like the standard is absolute excellency. That is what we're pushing. It is what we push to each other, it's what we push to our customers, it's what we push to on the internet and in the open marketplace. We are trying to basically push this idea that what our company is about is quality, our programmers are highly skilled, and so forth and so forth. And yet I continuously come back to this, that I continuously see that that's just not true. It's just not true. It is a big fat lie that it is as if I don't know what to say. It is as if we just pretend, we walk around and we pretend that everything we do is going to be high quality, everything that we try, every programmer is super skilled and so forth. And like all of these things, they're just not true. At least not from the perspective, or from my perspective, because when you're on the inside of this, and I'm pretty sure that this is true regardless of what company you go to, you start to see that this facade, this idea is kind of naive, that you're all about high quality, because what you're actually about, which is pretty much what everybody's about, is two things. And that is, the first thing is the deadline and being able to ship something and being able to make these compromises, because compromises, that's 90% of what you do, for sure. This is something that confuses a lot of juniors, or like me. It's very hard for them to accept this. It's very hard, especially when they have this idea that, I've been saying, that we push this idea that we're about quality testing, we're about making sure that we're writing good code and efficient code and so forth. And this is only true if the situation allows you to do this. That's the only time you can do this. Because if you have any ambition whatsoever to do something or fix something within the code base that is inconvenient in some fashion, it is something that will take a little bit longer, or it's something that isn't considered to be directly tied into delivery, delivering on the current features or anything like that. If you try to do anything like that, you're going to have to work for it, and most of the time you're not going to be able to do it. And then you have other developers who have these, I don't know what to call it. It's just that when you have realized this, when you have realized that in reality, this idea that you're gonna go back and fix something, or this idea that you can put it to do and, we're gonna do a follow-up story here or something like that, when you start to realize that most of the time you're not, most of the time you only really have one shot at getting something correct or building something because at that moment in time, there is a willingness to invest in the feature that you are working on. But at the later stage, unless that thing is causing you problems or is directly tied into something that you are going to work on at that moment, you're going to have to support that thing and you're going to have to live with it for quite some time. So this is the thing that really truly confuses me when I work with other developers, if we're going to touch on that as well. And that is that when I work with experienced developers, I've never been able to understand how some developers they have seen this. They should know in their hearts, and they have seen this many times before. They know that a technical decision made is often extremely hard or almost impossible to change at a later stage if it's an important one. So if it's an architectural one or like some technical decision that will impact future work, it's highly likely that decision is going to stay around for quite some time. Yet it's almost impossible to get some people to really think about that when they're making a tech decision and really think about, all right, what's the best path to take here and how is that going to impact future work? And it's just, I don't know. Like as an example, like the other day I was working with a few coworkers and we were trying to decide on a strategy for integration testing or end-to-end testing in this regards. And so basically the first implementation made by my coworker was just as any end-to-end test, we were going through the UI and we were like actually persisting things correctly and everything was communicating with the backend system and we could do all of the things, right? We could log in as a user, do all the purchase things, etc., right? And so I explained that the only problem I have with this is that we're not clearing the database in between runs or in between test executions. And then my coworker just goes and says, yeah, no, we can't do that. And I go, why? Well, yeah, because we're using the actual production, like we're actually connecting to the database right now, the actual database with all the tests, like with import data and stuff like that, and we don't want to clear that because if we do that, then we need to re-import data, like just production data that we can use for testing purposes. And I just look at him. I said, "But wait, so." But you know, right, that this is, I mean, it is standard practice to have stateless tests when you're running unit tests or like tests that are in effect a sequence of unit tests. Because if you don't, you create a situation where some tests can't actually be written because you cannot make any assertions about how many of something, like of anything. If you're going to do anything that is depending on something like how many users do we have or how many products do we have or so forth and so forth, that is impossible for you to do without clearing the database because you don't know how many entities you have within the database. If you're not clearing it, you can't actually assert that the right sequence of steps have been taken. And I mean, this is like on every single top list of the best practices for writing any type of test. Like having a stateful test is just generally a bad idea due to the fact that this now pretty much, as I said, it limits your ability to write tests, but it also makes the tests, like the sequence, the execution order of your tests matter as well. And he goes, this is true, of course, but we really don't want our developers to have to start up their data, start up the application with a specific URL to a specific database or something like that. And we don't want them to have, I mean, if somebody forgets to do that, they're going to clear their data. And I just sit there and I'm like, is he serious? Are you serious? So what you're telling me is that you want to limit our ability to, like the thing that we're doing, like the writing tests is something that we do in order, like then like what's the point? if you're going to, like, your implementation has limited our ability to actually write the tests that we need. All that has to happen is that any single person who is using this approach or this thing that he built, the only thing that needs to happen is that you need to write a test that is in some fashion going to check the state of the application. And if that happens, you can't. There's no way for you. You basically have to skip that test because you cannot do it with this stateful setup. And your motivation to do this is so that the developer doesn't have to start the application with a different path, like a different database path. It's not like you have different databases, it's just that you have a different virtual database. You just basically need to provide an environmental variable, provide a path or something like that. That's your motivation. And he goes, yeah, because that's going to make it a lot less likely that people write tests. That confuses me. I just sit there and my first thought is, so, is it unfeasible to ask that of a person? I mean, shit, they can create an environmental alias that just makes it a one-click thing to start the database up in the right state. Or you can create a build task or something. Like, there's tons of ways to solve this problem that doesn't necessarily affect your ability to, your convenience as a developer. But no, apparently not. So that's the way to go. And this happens all the time. It's the same thing with your PO where, you're explaining that we need to do these things and they kind of go, yeah, I know, I understand, but is there any way we can we can cut down on the time to do this? And this just keeps on happening and I just don't know. I just don't get it. I'm not saying that we should try to write flawless software every single time, but surely at some point someone should start to see this pattern that these decisions that you make, these sorts of decisions are the decisions that are causing all of this frustration, all these problems that programmers later on complain about. Because it's not like I hear my coworkers and I hear other people, like friends of mine, just complain over and over about how shitty their system is. I mean, I don't think anybody is just happy across the board with the system that they are working with. And these are the sorts of decisions that make that happen. And it's like, I feel like the loneliest guy in the world when I sit there and I can't get anybody to listen. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just see these decisions pile up every single time, and at a later stage people complain about it, and then I just sit there and I go, but dude, you're an experienced programmer. You should see this. You should be able to predict this before it happens. So what I want you to take away from this is that, at least for me, the most confusing part about IT, what confuses me the most, is this hypocrisy between what we say we're doing and what we're actually doing. Because what programmers tell you, and what IT and managers and so forth, what they will tell you is that they're building high quality products where they're doing their best to make the best things possible. That is not true. It is absolute bullshit. Most of the time what's actually true is that you will hack things together and you will do everything to deliver on a deadline or do the thing that is least effort. That's usually what happens. So this idea that all software that is written is of quality is absolute bullshit. And it confuses me because I don't get it. Maybe it is one of those social lies that I'm too much of an introvert to understand, where it's just part of the game to lie to people's faces. I don't know. Have a great day.